They get it to him. More in space. A burst of speed. A first down for Purdue. He's still going. Moore cuts back. Touchdown.
All like that.
Each one more.
What's going on, everybody? You're tuning into another live episode of the Boiler Express podcast. I am your interim host. That's weird to say. While Damon's out, Dylan Kuhn here. We also have BXP Russ in the house. We have 5-0 Ghost and the biggest brain in the game today, Mr. The Stat Tank Frank. So, boys, how are we feeling about the latest of happenings here in Purdue fandom?
I'm good with
great.
it. I'm excited.
It's
Just
good times.
kind of fun to see things develop and get to March, because I think we've all kind of just been anxiously awaiting getting there.
We're gonna have to get some bigger trophy cases, that's for sure, because they are doubling by the week. It seems to be, which is a great problem to have. I don't know if that's in Babinski's budget. That's fun to say, but definitely bigger trophy cases are going to have to come about in Mackey Arena.
Yeah, it's always a great season when you can get the conference win and also the conference tournament win. I mean, what a conference tournament it was too, just from top to bottom. It's just full of upsets. I mean, it definitely felt like March.
It was so much fun. So you guys want to start with the Ohio State game?
Well, chronologically, I think we should start with Rutgers.
Start with Rutgers, yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah. See, this is why I don't host. I mean, this is why Damon's the host, because Damon is the best at it. So shout out to our guy Damon. So yeah, we'll start with the Rutgers game.
I mean, my takes were, it was good. It was good to be physically tested, led the way Rutgers does. I guess from a physicality standpoint, it was good to see us prevail, in that kind of game. It's something we've kind of struggled with. It was good to see us shoot the ball really well. Ethan Morton made 2 huge threes. We saw David Jenkins only hit 1. Mason Gillis was the Ken Pom MVP of that game. 5 for 5 from 2. 2 for 3 from 3, and was 4 for 6 at the line. 5 offensive rebounds, 4 defensive rebounds. Just all around great game from Mason Gillis. It was good to see, really, just on the from the entire tournament, and see our guards step up the way they did. That was kind of the big takeaway. But we did a really good job, I thought, of handling Rutgers' physicality. Thought they really got into us and really tried to pressure the ball, tried to make things difficult, and we handled it well. So we were down early, and then had a really good comeback, and it was a good pre-tournament test, in my opinion.
It's good to have Frank back. I mean, just listen to those stats roll off the tongue like it's no big deal. How good is it to have Frank back in the podcast? We missed you last week, Frank.
I'm just reading them off a screen, though. So
it still takes something I can't do. I can barely read anything. So, I mean, it's a plus. Russ, what's your thoughts, big guy? Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, our new most hated rival. We had to play them our first game of the tournament, which, we talked about Michigan and Rutgers both kind of makes us nervous. But, we got Rutgers when we got the job done. It wasn't pretty, which has kind of been the mantra in the Big Ten. And, in keeping with my frustration, I think I've told you guys before, I don't know if we've mentioned it on here, my biggest frustration with Rutgers isn't just that they've had our number in the past few years. It's that they aren't successful against other opponents. Like, we are clearly the class of the Big Ten as of late, and they can own us, but they can't succeed elsewhere. Case in point, tonight, a Hofstra team that we beat by 20 points, 19 points at home. They couldn't beat at home in the first game of the NIT. So, I mean, it's
hate
just
to see it.
Yeah,
it's a tough look.
It's tough.
And especially with the Big Ten struggling in March the way they have in recent years, that's just not a great start. But we're gonna prevail. We're not gonna let that trend continue for sure.
Christopher, your thoughts?
I definitely think that it was good to kind of get that anxiety and atmosphere for games to get us ready for March. I definitely think you saw. I mean, there's a reason that David Jenkins played a lot of that first half in that game against Rutgers because you could kind of tell Braden was a little bit sped up. But I think with that being said, I think we're going to be focused up. I mean, everybody kind of knows the perception of Purdue in March, so I think we have a team full of guys that want to change that perception and they're ready to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned we mentioned a couple names for that game too. We got to mention, you spoke on it a little bit, but Mason Gillis has just seemed to step up at the right times. Like when Walter was on the show, we talked about these bench guys, and of course now he's worked his way back in the starting lineup. But these support guys outside of like Edey and Fletch, can they do it consistently, and can they do it when we need it? And we obviously needed it in a close game for him to step up and have another 20-point game. So that was huge.
Yeah, anytime Mason goes off, I get super excited because I'm a big Mason Gillis guy. I think we're a big Mason Gillis podcast. So anytime he goes and has a day, it's always a good thing for all involved. So we'll lead that into Ohio State. Big dub for the Boilers, especially for me being a guy who's born and raised in Ohio, lives in Ohio. Anytime we beat Ohio State and really anything, it's fun for me. And I get to talk all this
Basket-weaving win.
Oh,
okay.
It was the best. So, Russ, go ahead. Big brain. Roll. Oh, what we got?
Well, thank you, sir.
Well,
appreciate it.
I gave you a compliment on accident. Damn.
Do you want me to go ahead and go, or do you want the actual big brain Frank to take that away?
Well, you two flip a coin. Russ, go. Russ, we'll let you go ahead.
Oh, we're going down the tracks towards off the rails again.
Age before beauty, big fella.
So this was another Edey game, right? Another 30-point Edey game. It was all about, he talked about in the post game that he even mentioned PJ saying this is one of those nights you're just gonna have to score 30. He basically was just not getting stopped down there, and they were playing decent on the perimeter against us. It was just they were seeing how far could Edey go? Would he break? Would he run out of steam? And so we just kept feeding the big guy, and he carried us right across the finish line. So.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Yes, Edey had 32 points. He had 32 points on 25 field goals, which I felt he shot through too many double teams and triple teams in that game.
Edey could have easily had 40 because he also missed like 6 bunnies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was, he shot 11 free throws still on top of that, so
11 free throws. Yeah. I mean, but he was clearly the path to victory in that game. And I feel like he did it against, against Penn State too, for a little bit of foreshadowing, but I felt like, he's a very competitive guy, right? And that he wants to show that he can fight through these double teams and triple teams. And, I can admire that to a degree, but also, you gotta kick it out sometimes. And I mean, yeah, we won the game. It's hard to knock a 16-point or 14-point win. But that's really my only minor tweak I would make to the outcome of that game or to the performance of that game is just to tell Edey to pass it out just a little bit more.
I'd probably say too, I'd be interested in knowing if some of it, because Zed Key is obviously not playing and Sensible wasn't there, if the goal was to try and just draw a ton of fouls, which we ultimately kind of ended up doing anyway, because like half their team had 4 fouls. But you know what I'm saying? I wonder if he was going through those double and triple teams just to try and get to the free throw line. But obviously we're not in those conversations, so who knows?
When we also had the stereotypical guy who doesn't score a lot go 5 for 6 from 3 against Purdue as well. Roddy Gale went 5 for 6 from 3, which is absolutely crazy. And, the first one goes in, you think, okay, I think he'd made less than 23s, I
was going to say, isn't he like a 23% 3-point shooter or something like that?
Coming into that game, I'm sure it's gone up.
He had one game. He had one game all year where he hit multiple 3-pointers, and that was a 2-for-3 game against Eastern Illinois. Other than that, it's 1 3-pointer or none all year.
Yeah. I mean, so you think, you hit one, he hits one, okay, fine, let him keep shooting. And then like, man, like he hit 2, he hit 3, he hit 4. I think he was 4 for 4, wasn't he, at the start of the game?
He got 5 to 5. He had hit 5 in a row.
5 to 5, yeah.
Of course.
I mean,
Jesus.
And
but
I'm just
honestly,
losing my mind while that's going on. I'm like, come on, dude.
like I wasn't losing my mind at first. I wasn't concerned because I'm like, this guy is not going to keep hitting, but then he kept hitting, and so we capped it at 5 for 5, and then he went one more and ended up 5 for 6. But what a performance from him, honestly. I mean, he's going to have a really good future.
And that
team's going to have a really good future.
I feel like you see those performances a lot in March. Is the guy that, the shooting percentage just isn't there, but for some reason something clicks and just he decides now is a good time to go off, and for some reason
Especially when he plays Purdue.
yeah, exactly. And for some reason that the basketball gods decide, hey, Purdue's that team you're going to go off on, buddy. Like, congratulations, you've done it. And then we all scream in the group chat and lose our minds, and the fun particular stuff.
My favorite moment, I think, of that game was right before halftime when David Jenkins got that high ball screen and just right into a deep 3. So we've kind of coined the term post loss Braden. I really want to patent, March time David Jenkins Jr.
Trademark.
Like David Jenkins Jr. in March is on another level. It's crazy.
It's the headband, man. That's what it is. You
Yeah.
break out that headband, you're a whole new player.
And he's got. I didn't realize he's got 5 trophies just to himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's got like 1 regular season, 2 tournament titles from the CAA, I think, and then the 2 from this year. I was like, geez,
damn.
When he's played in the tournament, I think he said as a 16 seed. He couldn't remember what exact seed he was, but it's like he's like, I've been on the other end of this.
He'll remember this seed.
So cool for him, to be in a situation where he's, top dog, so to speak. And it was interesting in that same interview, he alluded to, his role with the team being different than what he had expected. And so I wonder if, him coming in, he was expecting more of a starting job or more of a scoring role. And, it just didn't work out that way. But if there's one kind of underlying story to this year's team, that's it. It's just guys embracing their role. And it's as long as you're winning, that's, so that you.
And I'll be honest,
again,
I think that was a good assumption that he was going to have a starting role, but Braden has played 2 years better than anybody really anticipated.
Yeah, when I heard Braden and Fletcher were both starting for the exhibition game, I thought it was like just for that game. Like, I didn't realize that was going to be a season long thing for both those guys. So, because Painter rarely doesn't redshirt freshmen, let alone start them, especially when we have experience at that position. So,
I wonder if it was a conversation where, Painter basically explained what our guard situation was going into last offseason, especially our point guard position. And at the time, yes, we predicted Braden Smith was going to surprise people, but I don't think many people would expect a freshman to step into the Big Ten as a point guard from the bat and play like he has. So there might have been a thought that he was going to be the veteran that kind of steers the first team, and then Braden gets his, gets his feet underneath him in the Big Ten and in NCAA Division I basketball. But it didn't work out that way. Braden came out hot and, staked the claim on that job. And then, someone had to run the second team. And so David Jenkins couldn't really start next to him, having to, run the point guard when Braden's not on the floor. So.
And that's kind of a good segue into something I kind of wanted to touch on. Was there's been a lot of push for Jenkins to start over Lawyer going in the tournament. I'm not sure I agree. I understand the appeal to it because we get off on some faster starts, but I think that right now we have 2 guys. Well, one guy, mainly Jenkins. You can say first a little bit too. He's kind of hit a little bit of a decent stride lately, but regardless, we've got a guy or 2 in that second rotation that can really carry that second rotation so it doesn't fall off, compared to if you start Lawyer or if you start Jenkins in place of Lawyer, now there's such a drop off that sure the game might start off hot and we might get a 15-point lead, but we might crash and burn when the second lineup comes in.
Yeah, so I
Well,
was going to bring that up too when we got to Penn State, just kind of how he struggled of late. If you go back to the Illinois game, the last 4 games, he is 2 of doing quick math here, 2 of 12 from three-point land and just 2 of 20 from the field. So I
Carson
think
was
earlier-
3
not
of
great.
40 and then went bananas in the tournament. I'm just saying.
You know, and earlier in the season, you know, Fletch was that guy that, well, for most of the season, and honestly, I still believe this to be true, but he's that guy that you can't leave alone. You know, you can't get too far away from him because he's going to make you pay. And then then he hits a couple threes, and then he's going to attack your closeout and take it to the rim. I mean, he's an elite player. I'm not concerned about him. Like I'm really not. And Chris, I agree with you completely. I think that, you know, David Jenkins coming off the bench is probably where he needs to stay. Also because he needs to be the guy to relieve Brayton too. You know, if he starts at the 2, which I know is where he's played the majority of his basketball career, I just don't understand like who are we point guard by committee at that point? I mean I think that
God forbid both your point guards get in foul trouble at the same time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just think that you know, he gives our second unit some leadership, some stability, and yeah, if you haven't watched the interview with him, I think it was on Boiler Upload. It's really, really good. You know, him talking after the game and how cool this experience has been, and how previous teams, guys would get in arguments after losses and start blaming each other, and this team, it's like, let's get back to work. You know, and I want to I want to believe that's true. I have no reason to believe that it's not. So hopefully that is the case.
I feel like a lot of Painter's teams are that way. Just Painter recruits guys who are, you know, willing to sacrifice, you know, for each other, willing to work with each other for the better of the team and not just, you know, individuals. So I think that's just an MO for Painter teams as you know, they don't really, let's say they don't care about and high character guys. That's really a good way to sum it up is like Travion, I think is really good. Travion Williams is a really good, you know, example of that, is a guy who could have transferred and gone on somewhere else, but didn't, stuck with it, and had a great time while at Purdue. So I think that's, you know, that's a good omen to what Painter has going on at there at Purdue.
Well, I listen to a
and
lot
don't
of
forget-
player.
No.
I was just going to say real quick too, don't forget, I tweeted out that David Jenkins Jr. is only 11 points away from 2,000 now.
Oh, that's right.
So, you know, I would love to see him get it out of the way in the first round, obviously against a 16 seed where we're probably going to be favored by 20 to 30 points. So we don't have to, you know, stress about him getting a shot or getting his buckets. But yeah, he's just 11 away from 2,000. So,
And I've listened to a lot of player interviews, just, you know, let him play in the background while I'm doing stuff. But David Jenkins Jr. has mentioned in almost every single interview this season about the camaraderie on the team, how everyone's close, how everyone's friends. And to me, that sort of implies that that's not the norm, or he hasn't experienced that on other teams. Because you don't see guys that have been here for 2 years, 3 years talking about that regularly. Maybe because they haven't known anything else. So that is
kind of a wild aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. That was my interpretation of like him talking about that so much, you know, that like everyone's close on and off the court, everyone's friends, everyone hangs out. And that kind of like maybe implies that that's not what he's used to, that's a, you know, a thing for him. And, you know, I don't know if anyone saw when they interviewed Braden after the win, but he was mostly excited for the guys who have been here for a while, guys who have experienced the loss and experienced, you know, playing in that final Big Ten tournament game and losing, you know, and seeing how happy they were. Like he was almost more happy for them than he was for himself. And that, again, we have some pretty selfless guys.
I love this team, man. Like I really do. Like every dude on this roster is just, there's not a guy you look up and down this roster where you're like, you know, they're all likable. They're all just good dudes. They happen to be good at basketball.
Well,
and there is very much a selflessness with the team that I like to see compared to other teams I've watched.
And then that same interview with Braden, Russ, I believe you watched it. I love when people ask Braden kind of snarky or backhanded questions because he gives it right back to him.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm sure we'll get to the issues with the press or breaking the press or dealing with the press. But he was asked about that after the win, and like celebrating the win. He's got the piece of the net tied around his hat. We're talking about how does it feel? What is this a dream come true? And someone sticks their head in and is like, "What are you going to do about your issues with the press?" And he's like, "That's really hard when they put 3 guys on you." Like,
And watch his
just
face
like,
after he answers the question too. He's always got this little like, anyways, and then just turns the other direction. Like, yeah.
like, and he was
Hey,
like, "I don't
Brady,
know.
why
I
do
mean,
you
I
play
guess
so much better
involve
later in the
somebody
games
else."
at the beginning of the games? Yeah.
I like. I almost want to put together a montage of like Braden Smith interview answers. Does anyone remember Jonathan Motley for Baylor when they asked how they got out rebounded by Harvard?
That's a
Like,
classic.
it reminds me of that.
You
Like,
call and you bring it down after the missed shot, and that's a rebound. And they did that 4 times than we did.
yeah. Which, I mean, why
Such a
ask a
classic.
guy that? Why ask a guy that? I don't know.
And like my thing too is like these media guys know, like they have to know that the players understand that they had an issue with the press. It's like these humans
There you go.
on on social media.
Family friendly show, Chris.
Yeah, I know. Never mind. It's these people on social media. They're like, oh, they need to go practice the press. Duh. Thanks, guy. I'm glad that you know that because I doubt that the guy who makes $3.5 million that's been doing this since he was freaking 12 have thought of that idea.
I think I said in the thread too, we are average people. We aren't D1 athletes. We maybe
Speak
played some
for
high school
yourself,
basketball, and we're sitting there watching the game. Yeah, okay. Let's hit the court sometime, gentlemen. Let's see how.
No, let's not. We won't make it.
Right,
but no, we're sitting there going, "Don't get the ball in the corner. Why are you passing the ball into the corner?" And it's like we get mad and go, "Painter needs to coach better. They're getting the ball in the corner," and we're sitting there as average people, knowing you don't put the ball in the corner. So you think Painter hasn't said that at some point? You think Painter says, "Hey, guys, pass it to the corner. That's the first pass. When you break in the press, that's the best way to break a press." No.
I will play devil's advocate. This is the thing I've thought of.
Okay.
What if that's Painter's coaching? Maybe Painter's like, they're not expecting to go to the corner, get it to the corner and kick it to the middle. I'm not saying that's what it is, but what's the one thing that you're going to do that is going to throw everybody off? Do what they don't expect. Because they're not expecting you to throw it in the corner, so they're going to lay off of that guy, and then you can reverse around it. Where if you, obviously it's not worked out, but what I'm saying is that I'm not completely convinced because of Painter's big brain that he's not doing some wild stuff, because obviously we keep throwing it to the corner and we can't screw that up so many times that either Painter's a really crappy coach when it comes to the press, or there's a plan to it. There's a reason behind it.
Well, I mean,
Frank's got a better memory on coaching talk and the interviews and the coaches show, so maybe he'll remember this. But I feel like Painter has mentioned a couple times that one of our issues with breaking the press is we don't get the ball to the guy in the middle of the court, especially like kind of our side of the half court. Like he has mentioned that you've got to find that guy. You can't get in the hole facing the wrong direction with the basketball and not be able to see that guy and get him the ball. So I remember him. He has talked about that a little bit as far as his strategy for breaking the press is using that guy in the middle to kind of distribute and find the
It's
holes.
like breaking a zone. You have a guy flash to the middle to kick it there and then produce it out there, like you would have a guy run into the free throw line to break the press or break a zone.
Well, in his interview after the game, of course that was, again, Penn State pressed 9 times and we turned it over once. So like we did struggle breaking it. We did make it harder than it needed to be, but he basically said that we're just not being fundamentally sound. This is the term that he used. Not jump stopping, not finding the guy in the middle, not making easy passes, making it harder on ourselves. But I feel like the average person doesn't understand how mentally I don't understand. I've just heard Painter talk about it, but how mentally exhausting a press is, and especially playing a full game of basketball and being pressed at the end of a game of basketball. Like, go run up and down the street for 15 minutes and then have people, have 2 or 3 guys stand and trap you in a corner and try to find someone. It's just like, it's mentally and physically exhausting. That's why you see Purdue. I mean, just looking back at previous game, like Iowa pressed 34 times. And it wasn't a problem in the first half because the guys were still mentally, physically sharp at that point. But it didn't become a problem until late in the second half. And presses wear you down. That's what they're designed to do. They're designed to turn you over. They're designed to make it difficult to get the ball up the court. I mean, and comparatively speaking, Purdue is not terrible against the press. We're actually in, the 89th percentile in D1 of teams against scoring against the press. And, as far as turnovers go, we're only turning it over about 17% of the time, which I think the D1 average last time I checked earlier today was 21%. So we're not turning it over as often as most teams do, and we're scoring in the 89th percentile against the press. Like, it's yes, turnovers look bad, but it's not this kryptonite or the Achilles heel like everyone thinks it is. Transition defense, totally different story. But those two kind of go hand in hand sometimes.
The Twitter coaches are always going to be on their high horse, and why aren't they throwing the orange ball through the orange hoop? Like, that's what it was. No crap. Like, look at that. Anyway, no,
Yeah,
they've been on a plentiful on old Twitter.com.
The last note I'll make on the press too is like you talked about, we're actually in a good percentile against the press. And we talk about how Painter makes millions of dollars. We need to trust him to coach the guys to do what, is the best way for us to win the game or break the press. Well, we also play against teams that have coaches that get paid millions of dollars to coach basketball. And you would think if they looked at the numbers and said the best way to beat Purdue is press them all game, that they would do that. But they don't, because they know that the numbers will not work in their favor. So they do it late in the games. And just like when we miss a free throw late in the game, we sit there and go, wow, we got to work on our free throw shooting. When we could have been 18 or 21 in the game, but we missed 2 of the last 3 free throws. You're going to remember that turnover late in the game against the press. You're not going to look at how we did against the press as a whole.
Amen. Yeah, if a guy misses a free throw and 2 minutes into the game, you go, come on, man, clean that up, and then, but if there's 30 seconds to go and we're up by 2 and he misses that free throw, it's, what are you doing? It just caught, so timing is everything. If we're up 20 and we turn the ball over against the press and they get an easy layup in transition, you're just like, all right, don't let that happen again. But if it happens at the end of the game, it seems a lot more impactful. That's just humans being human. I mean, that's just the way we interpret those things. But yes, you're right. Teams were these teams are coached by coaches, but who get paid millions of dollars and who know how to design a press and coach a press. And we're in a situation where teams are having to press to beat us out of desperation. That's a good place to be. So, I don't think we'll necessarily be in that situation come Sweet 16, Elite 8 time. Fingers crossed.
We should add a feature to this podcast that anytime Frank's big brain says you're right on something, you get to put a little like tally in your box. And then
what's that ESPN show that does
Around the Horn?
Around the Horn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Because if Frank, like you said, Frank says, hey, you're right, that's like a badge of honor. You wear that. You be proud of that, Russ. Congratulations, sir. So, do we want to go on to the there's a game against Penn State, I think, where some trophies were handed out and confetti flew and happy times were had?
Yes, sir, there was.
Word on the
that was a fantastic game. Again, another great showing from David Jenkins. Again, he had 11. It just, Edie went off that, 30 points on 17 shots. You can't argue with that. But what I think is the most interesting thing about that game was how we've managed to shut down Jalen Pickett 3 times now. Like, I mean, he has not had a good game against us, period. I mean,
he was angry. He was not happy from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, especially toward the end. He was yelling at the refs, like not like casually talking to them, like raising his voice at the refs on calls and no calls. And yeah, that was he's usually a pretty even keeled guy. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a great player. But I was surprised to see that from him. But I mean, he was 4 for 13 from the field with only 11 points. I mean, that's a good day on Jalen Pickett, in my opinion. Like if you can make him go 4 for 10, that's a solid outing. Like defensively.
Yeah, I think it was interesting seeing again. I'm just this whole weekend kind of proved it again. I'm really impressed with how well Brandon Newman's playing defense. Kind of going along with Jalen Pickett. That kid was stuck to him like glue the whole time. It was great to see. And I think that it was good to see this team blow a 17-point lead and how they respond because of it. I'm a huge proponent of, especially late in the season, stressing the crap out of your team.
Yeah.
Be blowing leads or fighting back from getting down or whatever. And we kind of had a little bit of all of it in the Big Ten tournament. You know, we got down 10 or 12 to Rutgers. We had kind of a runaway win in Ohio State, and then we blew a 17-point lead. So we kind of had a little bit of a mix of everything that gave the opportunity to kind of go through everything we might see in the NCAA tournament. So I was happy with the weekend, and obviously we got all the hardware and stuff too, which is a plus.
I concur.
And check. Good job, Russ. Hey, Russ. Hey, good job. Great insight.
So as a group, how are we feeling about the big dance? Purdue got a number 1 seed. Thinks what is that? The second time we've gotten a number 1 seed. Am I correct?
I think it's
fourth.
It's like fourth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fourth.
One in
I think one in
96,
the 80s,
one in
twice in the 90s.
66.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
But yeah, I've seen everything. You know, I read a lot. I look at a lot of websites and listen to podcasts and stuff. And I saw this company that was advertising this simulation service. So you could go on their website, you could pay $70, and what it would do is it would run these simulations of brackets like millions of times and tell you who wins the most often. But they gave out a little bit of information before you bought it, and the one bit of information they gave is that Purdue was the number 1 seed who won the tournament most often in all their simulations. But if you wanted to get the rest of the picks, you had to pay $70. I'm like, man, to win your work bracket pool, that's really weird. Like that's a weird thing to do. But and then
because it's always the person that doesn't even watch college basketball that wins the office bracket pool. Everyone knows.
Oh
that.
yeah.
Well, seeing we don't need to pay the $70. We have Frank, so
right.
Yeah, it's like when I bet on a game or bet on a prop, and I'm like, yeah, here's my reason for taking this bet. This guy's been rebounding at a really high level lately, and the team he's playing gives up a lot of offensive rebounds, and
then
my wife will look at it and be like, oh, I know him, yeah, I like him, and then she wins more often than I do. It's crazy.
My wife is more of the I like their outfits kind of lady.
Yeah.
Their uniforms
But
are pretty.
you're right.
So you both like uniforms. You have that in common.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It
why
is
do you
always
think she
the
married a
person,
stooge
though,
like me, Russ?
it is always the guy or the girl who's like, I've heard of that school. Yeah, I'll pick them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, no, yeah, my cousin went to Boston College. Yeah, I'll go ahead and pick them in this game, and that they're always the ones, who do better. And it's hard for me to fill out a bracket because I want so badly to see Purdue in the championship, and who knows, this year could be the year. I mean, no one thought we were going to the Elite Eight the year that we did, so I just look at all the teams in our region and I just get scared. So there's a lot of good teams in there. Memphis scares me. I'm scared about Memphis.
But I will play devil's advocate. Those other teams are looking at us and saying that they're nervous too.
Agreed. I just from a play style standpoint, Memphis, they score I think 23% of their points in transition, and we're one of the worst transition defenses in D1. Like statistically, we are terrible at defending transition. So that's a game where we could get into a shootout type of game with Memphis. So they look to turn you over. They look to score quick off of turnovers, and that's just like a kryptonite for a team with young guards. Like that's bad. So that matchup scares me than the potential next matchup, between what would be Duke, Oral Roberts, Tennessee, or Louisiana. So, and I've heard every expert pick upsets for both of those games too. So, um, but I do feel like the East region is pretty stacked though as a whole, comparatively speaking. There, we're gonna have to grind our way to a Final Four this year for sure.
I will say that Memphis doesn't have anybody over 6'10", and the way
Right.
to stop a transition team is just score the ball. So you just give it to Edie and just let him lay it in. Because I've saw one guy at 6'10", one guy at 6'9", and I think the rest are like 6'6".
I love that's how we look at things like, those guys are short. They're only 6'10".
Yeah.
That's where Purdue basketball is at. Like, yeah, try 7'4". 6'10" is like short. Well, don't even worry about it.
I'm playing against a guy in stilts. Leave me alone.
Well, I
Not
did
only a guy
hear
in stilts, but a guy that's 300 pounds on stilts.
I did hear a talking head today said all you got to do is pressure Purdue's guards and they won't be able to get the ball into Edie. So I'm like, well, lots of teams have tried that.
Oh no, they
I feel like
figured
we've
us
been
out.
pressed every single game this season to some extent, like starting from the first game, and that hasn't really worked. So good luck with that.
Yeah, I know, you said it's stacked, and obviously you can look at the East region and say it's stacked because, what we talked about, 5 of the top 14 teams as far as odds to win the national championship are in our bracket, which is the most as far as the top teams go. But you can also look at it and say, well, Tennessee's a little depleted. They're not the same team post some injury issues. Duke is having a down year by Duke standards, plus they have a first-year coach. So first-year head coach in the NCAA tournament, might be a little bit flaky, and they're also picked to be upset by Oral Roberts by a lot of people. Kansas State is not even one of those top 5, 6. I think they're 7th or 8th best odds to make it out of our region of all the teams, and they're the 3 seed. And then, of course, Marquette, we've already beat this year. So on one hand, you can look at it and say, hey, it is pretty stacked. On the other hand, I'm with you. I think Memphis is the scariest matchup of the bracket. I think that's where we could find some trouble, like you said, with the guard pressure. But we know how to beat a Duke. We've got history with Tennessee, and we've beat them recently. We beat Marquette this season. I think Memphis. If we get through Memphis, I think it obviously sets up pretty well for us. But it set up pretty well for us last year, and we saw what happened. So,
well, and yes, this is a potential. We're playing a potential 8 seed or a 9 seed, but both of these teams, Memphis is 19th in KenPom, Florida Atlantic's 22nd. So these are 2 really good teams. So for example, Kentucky's 28th. So like if we hypothetically played Kentucky, that they're a lower rank in KenPom than our second game. So this is an interesting draw here. And I'll admit I don't know a ton about Florida Atlantic. I've heard they're really good shooters and they have a lot of experienced guards. That's all I know. But I'm hoping they can beat Memphis because I feel more confident about that game than I would playing a Memphis team.
that's the thing about the tournament is, we sit there and stress and stress and stress about Memphis. FAU could beat them in the first round, and we aren't even, our bracket looks completely different. Last year you wouldn't have thought we'd play St. Peter's in the Sweet 16. But
No,
that's how it broke
no,
down. So
no one did.
it's I think of Painter. I think he was referring to the Big Ten tournament, and it was referring to, when you play on the Friday, you're playing a team that's already played 2 or 3 games. So that's rough to try to get up with them when they're maybe gelling well and playing well. But guess what? They'd still rather be in our position.
Mhm.
It's tough to win any tournament environment. You're going to look at, especially it's the national championship tournament, so it's going to be stacked. And once you get past the first weekend, you're basically down to, teams that either win the top 25 or probably receiving votes. So you're going to have to win 5 really tough games to win it all. So it's just that's the way it goes.
One thing I always found interesting, and I want to know your guys' opinion, is people think if you lose early in your conference tournaments, you get some rest, which helps you in the tournament. Do you guys think that applies? Because, Purdue made it all the way, but I don't know. I think if you're warm and ready, I think is better than if you're rested. And then I think our guys are pretty ready at the well many times, but I just want to know your guys' thoughts on that.
So I've used that personally. I've used that as like sort of a mental justification when Purdue loses early in the Big Ten tournament. I think it doesn't matter. It's just a silly tournament. Yeah, I will rest up. I was reading last night, and there's actually a pretty strong correlation with how teams do in their conference tournament and how they do in the big dance. And no team that's failed to reach the quarterfinals in their conference tournament has gone to the Final Four. It's never happened.
Oh, wow.
So that automatic, who does that eliminate? If I remember right, it was Kansas, Kentucky. There were two others that
No,
were
Kansas lost
automatically.
in the final game, didn't they? They lost
Yeah,
in the championship game.
Kansas
I'm sorry, I
lost in the
misspoke. Kansas State, not Kansas.
Oh.
Kansas State. Yeah,
Gotcha.
Kansas State, Kentucky. There were two more that would automatically be eliminated if history holds true.
Yeah, Baylor and UConn.
I looked it up last night. I had to go through lots of
Frank's big
tournament
brain
prep.
forgot something.
Oh my
Mark
God.
the
Yeah,
calendar.
yeah. It did forget something, but that was an interesting thing. But it seems that momentum from a conference tournament does in fact carry over. Now that is what's happened in history. That doesn't mean that's going to continue. That doesn't mean that this year that we can't have the first team who didn't make the quarterfinals win a national championship. But that was just an interesting thing that I decided to look into. But my opinion on that in the last 48 hours has actually flipped. So if you'd asked me that 2 days ago, I would have said, take the rest. But
Yeah,
I wish the
and
Big Ten
hearing
tournament,
that too, I would agree.
Well, and you
I wish the
mentioned
Big Ten
rest.
tournament would be earlier too. I don't know why it has to be like selection show starts as the Big Ten tournament finishes. I hate that.
That is,
It drives me crazy.
I never even thought
Yeah.
about that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but you mentioned resting up for the NCAA tournament. We already have 4 days off. We won the championship and we have Monday through Thursday off before we play again Friday. And we during the season, we play, 4 games in 9 days. So and Payne Rose has talked about before that it's sometimes tough to come back after a longer layover. So
Yeah.
But I will say doing it in January is a lot different than doing it in March.
yeah.
I mean, everybody thinks that that lawyer's hitting a freshman fatigue wall. And I mean, I'm not completely against that thought because his threes are short. I mean, maybe his legs are coming out from under. I don't know what it is. I think he'll come back. But that being said, now I don't know. Whatever. I think the conference tournaments are stupid, but that's just my own personal opinion.
Chris hates fun. That's what it is.
No, it's not
Since
that I
you
hate
like-
fun. It's just it's
He's an
kind of like
optimist.
the Pro Bowl to me. Is that it's like you're risking guys. Look at Houston, Sasser, where he pulled his groin.
Yeah.
Look at what if freaking Edie on that hook and hold against Penn
Don't say
State that didn't get
Don't say
called.
Don't knock on
You know,
wood.
that's what I'm just saying. Is like there's no benefit to that type of tournament that other than it's just a money grab.
Well, my biggest thing about the tournament is I think it's necessary because it's an opportunity for teams like this year, for example, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio State, to get to the
You had
tournament.
20 games to get there.
Yeah, that is true. However, the issue with these tournaments is for teams that are at the top, like Purdue this season, you have very little to gain by winning and a lot to lose by losing. So, and I hate those types of games where it's like, Purdue was kind of on that last number 1 seed, first number 2 seed situation. And winning against Rutgers, Ohio State, Penn State may not have boosted us up that much, but a loss would have probably cemented us as a 2. So it's like you're having to fight to maintain, but not to gain anything. And that's and that a certain popular, YouTube channel, podcast platform said that, Purdue's in trouble because they didn't play anyone good in the Big Ten tournament, as if that's Purdue's fault. We played Ohio State, who beat Michigan State and Iowa, two Big Ten or two NCAA tournament teams. Rutgers, who a lot of people thought should have been an NCAA tournament team after losing to Hofstra tonight. Seems like the selection committee made the right decision there. And then Penn State, who, knocked off IU, a 4 seed, who is a tournament team themselves. I mean, come on. Come on. It's just silly. So for that reason, I also like the tournament. So I'm kind of torn is the big takeaway on how I feel about the tournaments.
Just since we like to, play the game where you pick a player or pick somebody, I'm going to pose the question that, Edie's the obvious answer, but if you picked a player on this roster that is going to make his name on this run, who do you think it will be? Have the Ryan Klein type of run in this tournament.
Newman.
Obviously assuming we make like the Elite Eight or deeper or whatever. What'd you say, Chris?
Newman. I think that he is he's set up to do it. I think he's got his confidence back, and I think he's going to be ready to roll. I think there'll be one game where he'll be maybe not quite like Ryan Klein, not quite like the banging threes out all over the place, but I think he's going to do it on the defensive end. I think that when we need a big steal to lock down in the Sweet 16 against Duke, he tips the ball away or something, crazy like that. I just think that I think he does it, but I don't think it's going to be offensive. I think it'll be defensive.
Yeah, he gives our team a different kind of dynamic in that he can be that pick six guy. And he's shown it too. His first start, I think what did he have, 3 steals for layups? I mean, it just, that type of aggressiveness, I'm definitely not knocking on Ethan Morton, but he doesn't have that necessarily. Ethan Morton's a great defender. But he's more of he's not as aggressive as Brandon Newman is. He's not going to hawk the ball like Brandon Newman's been doing. And Brandon Newman's been shooting the ball well too. So I like that pick. I think it could be a combination of him, and David Jenkins also. Just David Jenkins with his experience, postseason and his just experience in college basketball overall. I think could definitely be a guy who steps up and makes some big plays. I'd like to see Lawyer kind of get out of this little scoring rut he's in, and it's strictly that, a scoring rut and nothing else. He's been doing everything else really well. He's been defending well, so I agree with your Brandon Newman, and I'll lump in David Jenkins with that.
And I also think, and we kind of just talked about rest, but I kind of want to bring it up. Brandon Newman sat on the bench for 4 months. I mean, now you're bringing him into the starting role, and he looks like he's just like a jackrabbit. He's running around all over the place, where maybe not the guys are noticeably tired, but he brings an energy that I think we just didn't have, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Frank, Dylan, you got different guys you're thinking break out in this tournament?
I mean, personally, I'd like to see Newman. I think Newman's a great guy, and I think he's a great player, and I think he has the ability to have a few, at least a couple breakout games. So yeah, I'd like to see Brandon Newman just have his time to shine.
Frank, anybody? No.
Oh no, I mean I added in my David Jenkins pick. So
yeah, so the guy I was going to pick is Braden Smith. I think that we've talked about post-loss Braden. We've talked about how he came into this season. Here in all offseason, we don't have a point guard, and now he's hearing about the freshman wall. And especially with Lawyer hitting it, we're hearing about the freshman wall, and he's quietly played quite well of late too. Throughout the Big Ten tournament, he was very, very solid. And I think he's a little ticked off about, obviously, the press talk. Ticked off about, these kids are on Twitter now. They're on, all the social media, seeing not just what's on TV, but people clipping what's on TV about Purdue's not going to go far because of their guard play. You know, we even talked about how we're nervous against Memphis because of, you know, freshman guard play against a team that pressures very well and plays well in transition offense. So I think Braden is going to play with a chip on his shoulder this tournament, and like he has something to prove, which he does. But I really think he has a big tournament.
So, Russ, like you said, I think it was you to brought up the Twitter questions. We have a couple questions. One from an Ultimate Boiler. I don't know if anyone's ever
Who's that guy?
Yeah, I don't know who an Ultimate Boiler. That sounds
And he likes
familiar.
wrestling.
Yeah, it sounds like a wrestling fan. Anyway,
Right.
his question is: with only picking one Purdue player that isn't Zach Edey, who would be on the first team? Who would be on your first team All Big Ten starting lineup?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick Ethan Morton because not everyone can be a high level scorer on a team. It's just not feasible, and he does everything. He does everything to help you win. So I would pick Ethan Morton.
And I'm going to go with the other guy who does everything, and Mason Gillis.
That's who I almost picked.
Yeah.
That was gonna Mason was gonna be my pick.
The thing that I love to see during the Big Ten tournament is just this streak of white flying to the board to get the rebound. I'm like, it's Mason. Never mind.
Yeah, I'd also go with Mason. And if not Mason, the guy I just talked about, Braden. You know, I think Braden Smith was instrumental. You know, we talked about, you know, the freshman of the year award always goes to some guy that overproduces on a team that's not as talented. But it's not said enough, even as much as mentioned in our circles with Purdue, how crucial Braden and Fletch were to our run this year as freshmen in the Big Ten, true freshmen in the Big Ten. So Braden Smith to come in, and obviously he was on their all freshman team and received honorable all mention all Big Ten. It was a mouthful. You know, I think that if I had to pick somebody else from Purdue on an all Big Ten team, I'd want Braden in my corner.
Yep, let's unmute the mic there. I think I thought we had another question from Twitter. Paul asks, will Purdue be sellers or buyers in the portal? He wasn't specific on sports, so I think should we just go with basketball?
I'm just going to say basketball.
Yeah, we'll go with basketball.
We kind of had this conversation already. I think we go after a point guard, and we talked about how close knit this team is. I don't know if these guys want to break that up.
This could be an entire episode.
Yeah, we might have to shelve this.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Quick answers now, and we'll plan to do an episode on it at the after the season, after April 3rd.
Yeah. Well, and so the biggest kind of determining factor in this is what a certain 7'4" player decides to do. Purdue has a luxury of having a very talented and also very deep front court. So I'm not sure what that is.
It's like the Brady Bunch, but none of us know where to point.
It's correct.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Russ is perfect.
We've got Caleb First, a top 30 player. Trey Kaufman ran another top 30 player, coming out of high school. We've got William Berg next season. We've got Cam Heidi. We have a lot of guys in the front court.
If anybody, I could see Heidi leaving.
Honestly, like we are in the era of NIL. We are in the era of, not having to sit out a season when you transfer, transferring becoming easier and easier. I truly want to believe that these guys truly have bought in and have truly just embraced their role. And I don't care if I play 2 minutes or 40 minutes, as long as we're winning. But, human beings are human beings. And I guarantee you there are some guys on the bench who are disgruntled right now. Yeah, sure. We're winning, but, they feel like they can contribute more. And I wouldn't be shocked to see one or two guys go and try to, find more minutes elsewhere. And, it's a bad situation for them, but also a good situation. And the fact that, we are winning, but, you're playing behind, in all likelihood, the National Player of the Year. he should be getting the majority of minutes right now if you want Purdue to win. I mean, Zach Edey is the highest percentage shot in college basketball. I mean, I don't know. That's not a fact. I'm just paraphrasing here, but
He's top 5 at
it's
least for percentage.
and Painter said it's the most difficult part about his job to only let Trey Kaufman-Renn play 9 minutes because he's a great player and he's not getting to showcase that because he's playing behind Zach Edey. And it's super unfair to a guy like Caleb. I mean, Tom Izzo basically was trying to recruit him in his post-game press conference speech. It's like, oh, Caleb Furst could go to any other team and probably be their leading scorer, but he's fine, only taking 2 shots, here at
Back off
Purdue.
Izzo.
Yeah. But he's right. That's the thing. So I hope no one leaves. But I think if Edey stays, we're a mixture of buyers and sellers. We probably do need another backup point guard. I don't think Colvin's really a point guard. So that kind of just leaves Braden. I know Ethan has run the point, but I like him at the kind of 2-3 hybrid. So TBD is the long answer or the short answer on that, but it's a very, very complicated answer. One that we could do an entire episode about, honestly.
Yeah, I think the other major factor is what happens over the next 3 weekends. How close do we get? Do we raise a banner? And then how hard is it for guys to not want to run it back? Does it leave such a bitter taste that those guys on the bench that are already bitter say, I'm out of here? Or is it so close or as far as you can get and we raise a banner and they say, let's make history and do it again? The front court obviously.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were.
I was going to say the front court's the obvious. That's the selling part of the team. If you're talking about selling in terms of who do we, give up or who we lose in NIL, because the front court is just so loaded. The back court is, where we do still need to address something. Now, Braden can be a 30-minute plus guy next year. I have no doubt about that, but you can't just bank on him being the only point guard on the team for sure.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. And I truly think that if we get to Houston and don't win it, or hell, even if we get to the Elite Eight and don't get to Houston, I think that will keep a lot of guys around more than winning it all. Because I think you have situations kind of like you do in the NFL. Who's the biggest team that's lost free agents? Are the Chiefs, because that always happens after a Super Bowl. So I think if we do win it, I think we have more of a chance of losing guys because they'll be like, I was on national championship team, compared to the inverse.
Everyone wants to win.
That's the hardest part of college sports is that, when you win, your players either go pro or, or they think they can, they want to go elsewhere, and that's just the unfortunate nature of it. But, regardless, we have just a terrific pipeline of guys coming in, in future years. And I have full confidence, regardless of what happens in the transfer portal, that Purdue is going to be fine. I did get to see Jack Benter play. The kid is unbelievable. I mean, he is a Purdue player through and through, just extremely unselfish, can shoot the lights out. I mean, and the most impressive thing to me from seeing him play was his passing. Like, he was making unreal passes. So he's going to be a fun player to see develop. Probably a redshirt guy, but he needs to bulk up a little bit. But just a terrific all around player. Plays really hard, diving on the floor, playing really good defense. He's going to be a fun guy to watch. So the future is bright, regardless of what happens.
Speaking of guys that bulk up, I sent that photo in our group chat earlier today of Edey in high school, and I hadn't realized how much muscle he's put on, since being, at I think was it IMG? Yeah, it was IMG.
Yeah, IMG.
It's insane how Paint and the weight staff and nutritionists and the whole team can develop these guys, and Edey's just really bulked up the last few years.
He took offense to, I think it was Chris who said Haas was our Drago. He goes, I can put on muscle too.
Wow.
So I think we can end things with this. Next we have Purdue plays the winner of Texas Southern and FDU. I'm not going to even try and pronounce FDU's name because it's difficult and I'm not good at words.
Fairleigh Dickinson.
There you go. So Frank, we'll start it with you. What are your thoughts on those two possible matchups for the Boilers?
Well, we have Texas Southern, who is ranked 285th in KenPom. And where's Fairleigh Dickinson?
Did those
They
numbers
are,
hurt, Chris?
They're like 331.
yeah. So the 312th. So neither one of these teams have a winning record. Texas Southern is 14-20. Fairleigh Dickinson's 19-15. I mean, we could get into the specific stats, but I just think that probably speaks enough. I mean, this is a game that if we can't win, we shouldn't be in the tournament. I mean, we don't deserve to be in the tournament. So, as Russ said earlier, I expect, regardless of who we play, that we should be favored by double digits, probably 20,
A lot.
in this matchup.
I'm excited to see how these teams prepare for Zach Edey, because I doubt any of these conferences have a 7'4", 300-pound, absolute beast in the
Unit.
paint. Yeah, so I'm really interested to see how these dudes triple, quadruple, do anything they can to try and stop Edey. That's going to be interesting for me.
Well, and so when looking at Texas Southern really quick, I mean they don't have they do start 2 6'9" guys, and they're both seniors, but they actually start 4 seniors.
Yeah, but
so
they're
that
200 and 220 pounds.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I'm just saying they have a lot of experience. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the country. They're 336 in effective field goal percentage, 357th in 3-point percentage. They turn the ball over 1 out of 5 possessions, which is absurd. I mean, they just
And
this
that other
this
team, Fairleigh Dickinson,
Fairleigh Dickinson.
the tallest guy in their starting lineup is 6'6".
So short.
I mean, so this is the equivalent of like the first or second game of the season by game type of game that we're looking at here.
No
this isn't
disrespect to those teams.
no
in the slightest,
none at
but-
all. But this is like a legitimate like buy game that we're going to be walking into here. Just looking at Fairleigh Dickinson, they're 361st in defense. So that's terrifying. Like that. I mean, we haven't seen a team that bad defensively all season. So that should be a game where we just run through the building, in my opinion.
Hello, Chris's cat. What's your cat's name, Chris? What do we?
Donner.
Oh, shout out.
Yeah, Chris, if I'm right, their tallest guy was what, 6'6"?
Yeah.
So yeah.
6'6", 219.
An Ethan Morton size guy trying to guard Zachy. Yeah, okay.
Get him a ladder.
As Rafferty says when he gets the ball in the low post, say goodnight. I mean, it's going to be they're going to be saying goodnight in the first half only, and that's nothing else. If
Edey has to play the second half, I'm going to be upset.
Yeah, I was going to say Edey may just rest the whole second half. Why not?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
That game is at 6:40 tomorrow on True TV. If anybody wants to tune into that.
True TV still a thing.
Yeah, that's like 90.
Yeah, this is the time of year you got to go.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah,
TV.
I think every year I say, "Oh, True TV is still a thing," and it's always this time of year. Like, oh,
Spike TV 2.0.
The old retired folks who are going to be pissed off that their soaps aren't going to be on because it's just basketball. Sorry, Russ.
So I think we should wrap with one just thought provoking question that I just love to get your all's opinions on.
I have to use my brain.
Well, so like you always hear like you want to be hot, you want to be playing your best basketball, going into March. So I guess my question is are we playing our best basketball? Is Purdue playing their best basketball right now? And if not, when were we playing our best basketball? So Russ, what do you think?
That's tough because obviously the natural answer is, when we went up to the Northwest and, beat 2 really good teams in Gonzaga and Duke handedly and made that rise to number 1. But, the competition in the Big Ten keeps getting trashed and the depth in the Big Ten keeps getting trashed. But, those were some hot teams that we handled. And I would say handled, even in Penn State's case, even with their comeback late, because we were up 17 and pretty much coasting. And yeah, then we started to play with some minutes a little bit. Edie was in and out. We didn't maybe take that game as seriously down the stretch as we should have. So I would say that we're firing the way we would want to be going into March, even though most of the fans don't see it that way. I do think that, you talk about guys like, Smith is not hitting the freshman wall. David Jenkins Jr. is stepping up now and starting to really understand it and flourish. Brandon Newman in the starting lineup, that's as late in the season as I can see Painter making a lineup change in a team that is a 1 seed, a top seed team. I know he's messed with lineups before in past when we're not doing great as a team, but we were in position to be a 1 seed even late when he said, you know what, we're going to put Newman in there instead of Morton. Guys like Mason Gillis understanding their role and stepping up when they need to be. So I do think that we are firing very well going into March right now. We've only won 2 Big Ten tournament titles ever, and we just won one. And won the Big Ten by 3 games. So, yeah, I think we're playing some of our best basketball as a team. We're playing team basketball now.
I think we're in a meat grinder towards the end of the season, but we're currently on a 5-game winning streak. That said, I think our best basketball was after the Rutgers loss, because we had to immediately turn around and play Ohio State at Ohio State, and we won by 2 in kind of a meat grinder game. And then we had to go to the Palestra, and then we just ran through teams after that, including going to Michigan and winning by 5. So I think that was probably more impressive to me than the PK85, because what's the one thing I've always argued about conference tournament or conference schedule is you're playing teams that you play once or twice a year and have for the last, in Painter's case, 18 years. There's a ton of tape on what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Where those games in November, those 3 teams or whatever, just didn't really see us that much, or maybe never have, And on top of that, the closest thing Duke has, or closest team that had anything like Zach Edey is Duke, a 7-3 guy. So I think, and they were coming into their 5th game of the season or whatever with a new coach, so there's a little growing pains. I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think the best time we'd played was June or January and beginning of February, and then I think we are playing really well. We're executing really well. It just doesn't look like it because shots aren't dropping.
Yeah, I think momentum-wise, 2 trophies, baby. Cutting down the 2 nets, cutting down, all these. I think momentum-wise, right now they're high and mighty, and most of the time that can be a good thing. But also sometimes teams can catch these teams that are hot, off guard, and then all hell breaks loose. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think right now, confidence-wise is the Boilers got to be just buzzing. And I think if you look at Edey after the Big Ten championship or Big Ten tournament championship win, man, I think that's the happiest I've ever seen him. Just like you can tell, like he was on cloud 9. And so I'm expecting big things going into the tournament with momentum wise. And I think Edey's just going to go off, hopefully. Knock on wood. Hopefully I didn't just jinx him, but you know how that is. So any closing remarks here, boys?
Yeah, I just want to really quick touch on, I know we talk about some of the other programs. Baseball is 8-7 right now. They just played a series at Ole Miss, the number 4 team in the country, and we did get swept in the 3 games, but we did push them to 10 innings in the second game. So, we played well, played respectable. The women's team also is dancing. They play Thursday night at 7 against St. John's. They're in the first 4 on the women's side. St. John's they're a decent club. They beat UConn late in the season at UConn, and we know how good their women's basketball program has been. So it's not going to be an easy game, but they are dancing again for the first time since I think 2017, and that's always good.
Katie Gerald's, she's the best, the coolest. Beast. I wish I was as cool as Katie Gerald's. All righty, boys. I think that's a wrap on today's episode. Appreciate you guys letting me host, even though I'll never do this again because it was way harder than I thought it was. So Shout out to our guy Damon who does this every week. I don't know how he does it. It is 10 times harder than I could ever imagine. So make sure you follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Am I missing anything? I think that's all. We appreciate
add in that we are live on YouTube now.
we
So
are live on YouTube
Yes, our YouTube, or so when we do our live shows, they will also be up on YouTube.
now. And when you leave a comment in the YouTube comments, it pops up so we can see it,
Yep.
which is
Be sure
really
to like and share, help that algorithm bump up a little bit.
subscribe and
Subscribe.
throw a like at it. I don't know what the kids say nowadays, but appreciate everyone tuning in. Boiler up, hammer down, go Purdue.
Boilers by billion.